The restoration industry is constantly evolving and changing, and there is no place where this is more evident than with technology. One company that's spearheading innovative technology in our industry is CoreLogic, which provides several critical platforms and software solutions that you need if you wish to be both competitive in the marketplace and deliver the very best to your clients that you serve. And to speak to this, I have an expert with me today, a friend, Brandon Burton. Brandon, how are you?
Doing great. It's great to see you again, Jeff. It's been a while.
Brandon, you are the senior principal of industry relations with CoreLogic. So quite a job, quite a position. I'm sure you enjoy every minute of it.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure to fill that role and bring, a very different perspective to industry than I've had the opportunity to in the past. So I'm very gracious for the opportunity.
I look forward to today's discussion. We're going to talk about a couple of things. The first one I think is really interesting because Brandon, I know you and I met many years ago, and I'm just thinking about your experience, but in your career, what have you personally seen change with technology?
My career in the industry goes back to the very early 1990s. And I can remember at that point in time just watching the emergence of even the moisture meter come into the industry. Back in the days when we had Tramex, we had Visala, we had a couple different meters that were out there, but for the most part, a lot of restorers were just using hydrosensors. Basically just beep or no beep, right? And then just watching that technology progress, and then watching low grain refrigerants, kind of come into the industry and into the market. And it's been amazing to watch that from that period of time in the 90s and seeing that growth in technology, and then watching what's been happening more recently and just seeing the absolute escalation of the growth in technologies as we've gone into the digital age. It's been amazing to watch. But, it's interesting because to me, what I see is the biggest change recently, where it was really about drying technology that was advancing so rapidly, back in the 90s and the early 2000s. And today, it's all about documentation, the speed of information, the accuracy of information, the utility of that information in the entire claim cycle. It's been really amazing to watch that technology evolve. That's been remarkable.
Your comment about beep or no beep, Brandon, that is about as far as I got with my own technology.
Yeah,
So,
it's been amazing. I remember the first days that I actually saw a display on a meter, and we started seeing the industry adopt measurements as a way to understand how dry a building was, and how that really launched the whole conversation about psychrometrics and about dry standards and drying goals, and it's our industry has just matured so much.
yes. And I do appreciate all the articles. I know you've done dozens of articles for CleanFacts over the years about technology, and you've made it easy to understand, which is important because technology is not always easy for everyone. And those watching this, Brandon, might think about those beep and no beep days and wish they were back then. They were back there, but got to move on, right? Got to move on.
Yeah, and my philosophy has always been, because I'm a very simple-minded person, I've got to make sure that I understand it, right? And if I can understand it, then I think anybody can understand it. And I've always tried to bring that through to whether it's writing an article or teaching a class, just let's just get it down to the common sense terminology and the common sense process, and that's where we have to live.
Yeah, good philosophy. Let me ask you this question, Brandon. How critical is it for a restoration company to keep up with technology, and how do they do it? Because some may push back, but what do you think about that?
So I've always I had a conversation a long time ago with a gentleman named Graham Dick. I was at a conference, I don't know, back in, I don't know, maybe 2001, 2002, somewhere in there. And we were just sitting down, kind of having a conversation about what was most important to any professional in any industry at large. And he shared with me this model that stuck with me ever since. And I'll share this because it's a good way to stand this up. All of us as human beings, we're subconsciously in some way incompetent in what we do, right? Because none of us are perfect, right? I think the only time I've ever lost that argument was with my wife when I married her, right? So apart from that, none of us are perfect. And what we do in business and in industry is we become consciously incompetent in what we do. Something happens, we make a mistake, whatever it is, we become aware of something that we need to improve, get better at as a business. And those that are successful constantly work at those things to improve them. And I think a lot of what we see with adopting change in industry and advancement really hovers around that kind of step in evolution in business, right? We have to constantly ask ourselves, even if I was perfectly prepared for the way business operated yesterday, if I don't change, I'm antiquated for the way that it's going to operate tomorrow. So where is it changing? How can I stay in front of that and make educated decisions about, how I need to adapt my business to this change? Because as soon as you become competent in anything that you're doing, you got to remind yourself that we're not perfect, right? Business is evolving, technology is evolving, it's changing. And I think one of the things that gives us a lot of anxiety in the industry is sometimes it's change for change's sake, and sometimes it's change because that's where the industry is headed, right? We have to be able to kind of weigh and understand the difference between those two and make really educated decisions about how we're going to invest in staying current with those changes. And the only way you can do that is to constantly analyze that. What is changing? Why is it changing? How does it impact me and my business? Does it bring benefit to my customers and my clients? That's one category I'd always put them into. Or does it in some way help me control or manage risk in my business? Which is it's a big topic in this industry.
I understand, Brandon, that CoreLogic and Xgear Solutions has some innovative technology with a product called Mitigate. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I'm super passionate about this topic. One of the reasons why I was most excited after working with Legend Brands for 25 plus years and being their technical director, so really being involved in kind of the hardware side of understanding how to solve our industry's problems. One of the reasons I was super excited to come to CoreLogic was that gave me an opportunity to look at the other side of that equation, the software side, the technology side. And Mitigate is kind of the manifestation of my focus for the last 5 years with CoreLogic in taking software, and instead of designing software for the sake of compliance and for the sake of what needs to be ultimately fed into the claim cycle, software needs to serve the user, right? It needs to serve that technician in the field. And that's where my passion has always been in this industry. It's been in the trenches. That tech in the field at 2:00 in the morning, crawling underneath the crawl space. They're the ones that have to collect that data. They're the ones that have to use that data. They're their own customer of that information. So I've spent the last 5 years with CoreLogic really focusing on that. Previously Nextgear, but we were acquired by CoreLogic. And Mitigate is the culmination of that effort. Not just my effort, but a number of experts within CoreLogic, a number of folks in industry that have helped us beta test what Mitigate has become. And it's right around the corner. It's just about to release, but I'm super excited. Just me personally, and where I've invested my time in industry, I really feel like I've had an opportunity to really embed that in this product. So very excited for it.
Yeah, it's really cool to hear about new technology like that. So we look forward to that. How are CoreLogic and Xgear Solutions compatible or complementary to industry standards such as IICRC? Because you have the software component, you have the technology, but then you have your standards. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, absolutely. And to me, that's what makes the software side of things so necessary is, now just case in point. So the S500 was just recently updated a couple of years ago, and that document became a bit more technical, a bit more complex. It does as our industry matures, and it's already under revision again, right? There's already a consensus body that is tearing it apart and rebuilding it and going to release it out into the industry again here in the next year and a half, somewhere in that neighborhood. Well, keeping pace with that, all the while dealing with the natural rate of turnover we have in our businesses, the growing rate of demand by the consumer, because now we have Google and the internet and everybody knows something about everything, right? All of those complications being piled on the restore, especially that technician in the field, right? Again, that's where my heart is that tech in the field that's got to look at this emergency situation and make these immediate determinations in this emergency environment and be accurate to the standard of care and everything that they do. That's a tall order. That's a really, really tall order. And that's where the technology comes to bear, right? If I have the tool in my hands where as soon as I indicate, and I'll give you a really simple example, but there's much, much more in-depth examples. But as soon as I indicate my source of loss and when the loss occurred and other elements like that, the app is already popping up standard of care recommendations for me so that I can comply with that current standard of care, at least be guided to those decisions. It really takes a lot of duress and anxiety away from the restoration company, right, that is trying to deploy those technicians into the field, trying to mobilize that expertise when you know you have a tool that has that expertise baked into it. So that's how they relate. The right tools enable that standard of care application in the field, right? They support and enable that application. And that's what Mitigate does.
I know you've worked on standards for many years. Is it frustrating at all when you complete one and then it's like, okay, now start over again? Does that come into your thinking at all?
Yeah, yes and no. Yes, that's a great question. Yes and no. The hard part about standards is, standard of care development, especially ANSI standards, are developed by putting, 14, 15, 16 professionals onto these calls where they're meeting every week and debating everything under the sun that relates to a particular topic. And none of them are short of passion for their opinions, right? And we have to put these opinions out on the table. There's disagreement, and there's a whole lot of, we'll call it argument that occurs over, is it right or left? Is it up or down, et cetera? But at the end of that process, and this has been one of the most rewarding things to me about industry, at the end of that process, you now have 14, 15, 16 colleagues in this industry with just the deepest level of respect for one another, regardless of their difference in opinion, because of that process. So on one hand, yes, it's very belaboring, it's very difficult, it's very hard to achieve consensus with such strong experience and opinions in industry. But at the end of that, it's almost like you're at the end of this family retreat, right, where you've had all this time with all these people that you so deeply respect, and to see that come to a close, it's almost like a piece of you is gone. So it's kind of a give and take. It's a catch-22, if you will. It's a very difficult process, but very rewarding at the same time.
I want to talk about an important event coming up, interconnect, something that CoreLogic is proud of. Can you talk about that? Who should be there? What's it all about? What are the takeaways for those who come to this event?
So the interesting thing about interconnect is that interconnect is very different than what we typically see for industry events. Usually an industry event is very, very focused either on the lateral in an industry, meaning a certain level in a business across different stakeholder groups, or the vertical within one stakeholder group, right? It's focused, for example, purely on restoration and the roles within a restoration company. It's very rare to have an industry event that has the lateral and the vertical both there at the same time. That makes it very, very unique because the event focuses across all of those that touch the claims process, whether it be the restoration company, the insurance company, underwriting, third-party administrators, the entire gamut of all of those and all the service providers that are plugged into that from a vendor perspective. It focuses across that full lateral, but then it also digs in through the full vertical at the same time. So it gets into the management, it gets into the operations, it gets into the field and production operations, and touches all of those aspects across the restoration and insurance community. So that makes it very unique because you have all of those perspectives on the table. And when a topic is brought to the forefront, we hear the perspectives from all of those different angles. So to me, at least, it was one of the more eye-opening experiences that I've ever been through, is going through an interconnect event. And I've been to a lot of trade shows. And it's not to say the rest of them don't have a substantial value. They do, but they're very focused. They're very centered. And when you get a broader perspective of that, it kind of reminds me of the industry standards experience, right? We have all of the different stakeholder groups that are at the table to make sure we have an accurate result in what we document. And it brings, to me, what it does is when you have a presentation at an event like that, it's almost like it brings a different level of integrity to the information because it has to touch on all those perspectives, right? Because it gets the resistance and feedback of all those perspectives in the Q&A and everything else. So it's very unique. And I would highly encourage anybody who's committed to this industry as their profession this is an event that you don't want to miss, right? If this is what you're going to do from now to the day you retire, you need to be at Interconnect because it's the best, broadest range show you're going to find.
Thank you for the details. For those watching this, I'll put all of that information down below in the video description with a link so you could look at this event as an opportunity and attend. I'll be there, and I hope everyone watching this recording will be there as well. Brandon, as a final point, anything you want to share, open mic opportunity to the industry, things that people should be aware of or know about?
Absolutely. You know, one of the things that I always like to take an opportunity to talk a little bit about whenever I can is just about standards in general. You know, obviously it's been a big commitment myself that I've made to standards. And one of the things that I would like to see our industry do more of is to get more engaged with the standards writing and development process. So just a couple of things, a couple of calls to action for anybody who has an interest in the health of this industry. iicrc.org, click on standards, review the standards that are there, at least be aware of all the standards that are available to our industry through the ICRC. But more importantly to me, look at the status of these standards. Look for the ones that are calling for volunteers. Look for the ones that are currently calling for members, if you really want to dive in and roll up your sleeves, that are calling for members for a consensus body. Not only will you have the opportunity to make an impact on the industry as a whole by participation in standards, the deepest friendships I have developed in my life have come from these consensus bodies and the individuals that I have met that have made that commitment to this industry because they care so deeply about it. And having those arguments with them and having those debates about, you know, right or left or up or down, and then coming away from that with that mutual respect and friendship, they're like family. So if you really, again, you really want to be at the forefront of ensuring the health of this industry moving forward, there's no better way to do that than to become involved in standards. So iicrc.org, click on standards, know what's there, but look where the opportunities are to volunteer and be a part of it.
Well, Brandon, thank you for this today. Great information about technology, what CoreLogic is doing, interconnect, and standards as well. We covered a lot of ground in a few minutes, but I do appreciate you and look forward to our next project we do together.
Absolutely. And Jeff, it's awesome to see you.